Alrighty. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Infidelity. I am so excited to be here with you all on today, and I'm super excited about the message that we are going to talk about. And very rarely does this happen, but today I was like, oh crap, I don't know how I'm going to start this conversation. And it's so funny. Like, okay, I'm just gonna kind of do it how I don't normally do it. But you guys, so I am super excited. We have a new friend to the show, Miss Stacy. And so, Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so funny. I'm totally going off of like how I don't normally start, but it's fine. It's fine. It's going to be great. But yes, I guess I will say, again, welcome back to another episode of Life After Infidelity. My name is Briaina Latrice. I am your favorite affair recovery coach, and I'm helping you to remove the shame of your decision to leave or stay after infidelity. Because whether you leave or stay, both decisions will be hard, and I am here to navigate your heart. And so, yes, Stacy, it's funny because for the past 2 weeks, I have been getting your conversation confused with other people's. And so, like, every time I'm like getting ready, like 2 weeks ago, I was actually fully prepared for our conversation. And then I got on and I was like, oh crap,
Oh,
this isn't
that's not
Stacy.
Stacy.
And that conversation was still really good, but like I say that to say for the past since you and I met, I just really enjoyed like your story, and I knew that the the wealth of information you were going to bring to this talk was going to be really really good. So like I've just been uber excited, and then it's kind of crazy, it's like fast forward to today and I'm like, oh crap, I don't know where I want to start. And it's funny because I looked over my old notes, and you're familiar with this type of work, and it just today that conversation wasn't resonating with my spirit. So I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about that today. So I'm super excited though about what we are going to talk about.
Yeah, and I love that, right? It's like
Yeah.
I love that. It's like there's if we sometimes we can plan and overplan and
Uh-huh.
over prepare. It's we want to be prepared, but sometimes just kind of allowing spontaneity and what comes forth, it
Mhm.
can be magical and powerful. And
Yeah.
I think maybe part of why we're together.
Yeah.
Stuff that we're here together to bring
Mhm.
out.
No, absolutely, for sure, because that's literally just what happened, you guys. We were just chatting briefly before I hit record, and I was just being honest with Stacy, and I was like, I don't know where I want to start. And so we had a few conversations, and Stacey's going to get into her story, of course, but she made a really strong statement. And that one was the one that resonated with me. And I believe that that one is supposed to be what you listeners who are listening to this episode today is supposed to hear. And so, she mentioned that serial infidelity comes from not being in your power. And, Stacey, we see that, like, especially in the line of work that we do, because that's even mentioned like in my bio, taking your power back. And so a lot of betrayal genres, like we're big on that taking your power back. But I've never heard it talked about how you mentioned serial infidelity comes from not being in your power. And I would love for us to just start there and for you to speak on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was my own journey that brought me there, right?
Yeah.
Um, I've been 10 years now
Oh,
out
wow.
of my relationship with my first husband, who
Mm-hmm.
was the serial cheater. And when when the cheating was so big and so bad and so loud, that final one, that when I found out about, there was no possible way I could continue to move forward in the relationship with him. Like,
Okay.
it got to a point where I couldn't make myself that small. He there was It was a nightmare what he had sort of the road that he had gone down to.
Yeah.
And so when everything fell apart, which is the way I looked at my life back then, because everything did
Mm-hmm.
fall apart. I had stepchildren that I was really close to, and my whole
Yeah.
life was built around my now ex-husband. And I just thought, how did this happen? Like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And so I had done this timeline exercise where I looked back, and had myself look at every single red flag that had come my way. The beginning red flags before I even knew of anything, but I suspected, and the times that I would catch him. He was a big emotional cheater. That was his big thing.
Okay.
It led into physical cheating, but emotional cheating was what I discovered first and foremost. And my question, as I looked at it, my question to myself was, why did I keep why did I keep going back? Why did I keep,
Yeah.
because it just happened again and again and again, and then to where um there were times I wasn't even listening to my intuition. Like I knew, but he would
That's a
tell
big
me,
one.
yeah,
Listen
he
to
would
that
tell me,
intuition.
he's like, no, I'm not doing anything. And we had done
Mhm.
kind of our work, or I thought we had. Um, and he would say, no, I'm not doing anything. I was like, so this is me. This is my jealousy. This is my insecurity.
Yeah.
He would look me dead in the eyes. Oh, yeah, this is you. And so when I think back to it, as I was going through that time, it was like, what would it have felt like if I was in my power? What would it have
Yeah.
felt like if self love was first? Like, what would
Right.
that have been like? And then when I looked at why I continued to allow it, it was always either seeing what I wanted to see instead of seeing what was there, right? So not kind
Mhm.
of honoring myself and my strength. And then other times it was, I wanted it to be where we had this. I was afraid because in my time with him, I had given up my career. I gave up a lot of things to be in this relationship with him. Um, I remember even one time in it, I wanted to go back into work, and he's like, "Oh, why?" I was teaching yoga and doing things like that, but I wasn't in
Yeah.
the career making money. And he was
Mhm.
like, "Well, why would you want to do that when the kids come?" Because we had the kids, we shared custody of the kids with his ex-wife. And he was like, we have such a great lifestyle, and you'll be working. And so he really convinced me to not go back into work, into event planning. At that time we were living near wine country, and I had opportunities to go into event planning. And if I had gone back to work, I would have been in my power, right? Like I would have been in my power. I would have been making my money. I would have been respected for what I did. I would have been confident.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that. And so
Mhm.
as the time went on, all of a sudden, I mean, it sounds crazy, but when everything happened, I'm thinking, how am I going to make money? How am I going to
Yeah.
provide for myself and my pets? And
Like, how do you even get out of this situation and
yeah,
restart? Because you're stuck at this point.
and I let myself get so small, and somebody else would look at me and they would think, well, what are you talking about? You had this big career and you had this, and somebody from the outside really doesn't understand, right? Because
Mhm.
they see our potential. They know what we have. They know our value, oftentimes, those who are closest to us.
Mhm.
But I didn't feel that way
Yeah.
within. I had given up every bit of my power. And so I went through the relationship again in my head, feeling it in my power. What if I was in my power? I'm like, if I was in my power and practicing self love first, no way. Maybe the first time, right? Maybe the
Yeah.
first time, probably the first time, right? Because
Yeah.
you want to give somebody the chance. You think, okay, but time two, three, four, and onwards,
Oh.
I wouldn't.
So, was it just multiple times or even throughout the course of years?
It was years.
Oh,
It
so
was
how many years would you say?
so when I went back to my little timeline exercise, within the first few months, there were red flags,
Of your
right?
marriage?
For no, first few months of meeting. Within the first few months of us meeting, there were red flags. But I understand now that not everybody thinks the way that I do. It took me a long time
Yeah.
to get to that. I used to
Right.
think that no way could somebody do certain things because I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine it. So that
Yeah.
was a big lesson for me. The whole world doesn't think the way that I do. And where
No,
I
and I think that's important what you're mentioning because it's so funny. I did the same things that you did. Like I went back years and years, and so when I started to look at different things, it was prior to us even getting married.
yeah,
So it was still early in our dating stages, and I'm like, man, but like you, I never because I'm a genuine, compassionate, honest person, right?
integrity, yeah.
Integrity. And like those are my core values. That's what I live on. And so like even when I got into college and people were like, well, so and so is jealous of you, so and so, I never thought that because that's not how I operate my life. And so I think it's so important to even stay there and speak to that, because a lot of the times we can miss that. For people like you and I who are super genuine, we
Yeah.
never consider that a person is capable who says they love you to
Yeah.
betray you.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And so between thinking that he's thinking the way that I'm thinking, and then I think there's even something within me because I'm an empath.
Yeah.
I no longer try to fix people, right? Even in my line of work, I support people, but I know that their power and their answers are within.
Yeah.
I never think that I have somebody's answers for them, but I can help
Yeah.
guide them to their answers. I can help guide them to their heart. But back then, I thought I could fix people. And I thought he really wanted to be fixed. So he would pour his heart out and I would think, "Oh yeah, he's touching my heart." So I would think that I could fix him and that he's thinking the way I am and that he wanted the biggest thing is I thought that he also wanted what I wanted, but that's not true. He didn't.
Mm,
He wanted
okay.
and I even remember talking to him about this afterwards. I was like, "Why didn't you just break up with me?" Like, there were
Uh-huh.
plenty of other women out there who would have been okay with it.
Yeah.
He was a good provider, different things. You could have found a woman who was good with open relationships and different
Mhm.
things. So, where
Mhm.
you know that this is what I wanted and you know this is what's so important to me, like, to me, it would have just, again, thinking the way I think, if this is something that you want and you know the other person doesn't, you just let them go. So I had that belief, that deep down belief that we wanted the same thing and that we were
Mhm.
both working hard towards the same thing and that he had his challenges and we were going to, work through them. And none of that was true.
Yeah.
None of that
Yeah.
was true. He was getting his
Yeah.
power from me. He loved me to the best of his ability. I really do believe that. Like,
Yeah.
he really did love me in his way. I came to realize that.
Mhm.
He just wasn't able to love me and only me because he was he was getting his fulfillment. He was getting his, I'll call it ego. He was getting himself to feel better
Yeah.
by, his thing was like kind of the chase and the conquest of
Mhm.
other women. That
Yeah,
made him
having
feel
those.
good. That's how he built up. And he, listen, he's got deep wounds down in there too, right? I think
Mhm.
everybody
Mhm.
does.
Mhm.
But he wasn't willing to do the deep inner work. He wasn't
Yeah.
willing to go into the shadows and pull out and do what needs to be done to be able to get his power and his confidence from
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
it's like a drug, right? It's
Seeking it
like,
outwardly.
yeah. And so I
Right.
think a lot of times with serial cheaters, not always, but I think a lot, it is their drug. It's how they get to feel better when they make that conquest, when they're not living with the person. So there's always
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
thing, there's the
Yeah.
chemical thing, but there's also that thing where that other person is always seeing just the best of them
Yeah.
and they're the hero. So I think that a lot of that was what is with some of these, with a lot of the serial cheaters.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you're saying a lot of good stuff. And
Sorry. I love this
I'm like,
topic.
I know. And I'm like, okay, let her cook. Let her cook. Don't interject yet. But I think, and I know you're gonna get into this, right? But power. And when we talk about, taking the power, there's so much there of like how we lose our power. Like you said, a lot of the times, people who are manipulative or like even serial cheaters, they get their power from us. And I think that is so important that you said that, because I even think about early on in my discovery of my ex-husband's infidelity. I remember speaking with a cousin, and she was like, Briaina, him sleeping with these multiple women, that's the only time that he can actually feel like that's the only time that's one of the only times like where he can actually feel his emotions, because he's blocking them out so much that this is like one of the only times, like. And so she was like, it doesn't mean that they mean anything to him. This is just the way that he operates. And even then I was so broken at that time, I still couldn't really receive that. It made me feel better though, but I couldn't receive it. But it makes me think about women who internalize their partner's behaviors, right? And it's like you said, one of the things that I work with women on within the steps of rebuilding trust is ability. Because once we get past like a couple of steps, then I ask them, okay, does this person that you want to rebuild trust with even have the ability to be the partner that you desire? And I love what you said. He loved you to the best of his ability.
Yep.
And I think that comes from a true healing space, because not a lot of people will really understand what you mean by that. But like even myself doing that work, now I understand, okay, I don't doubt that he loved me. I know he loved me, but like you said, he loved me to the best of his ability. And so I say all that to just say, when we talk about taking our power back, it's also understanding that we think that the person that we gave our power to is powerful, but they're powerless as well. And
100%.
so how do we start to, or how do these women start to even navigate that process of taking their power back from?
Well, so I think one of the things that I really believe, I believe that we are powerful. Our
Mm-hmm.
nature is we are in our power. So to me, it's not about bringing something in, but it's rather clearing what's in the way. So, what's in the way of us standing in our power? It's usually a belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a belief that we um, don't deserve more, we're not worthy of more. There's something usually within that we're not, that we're holding, that we're not worthy of something, that this is the
Yeah.
best we can get. And it's very deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but it's always, and I keep touching my heart because it's always sitting in our heart. But I
Yeah.
really believe that we have to kind of undo. And I think what happens a lot of times, what I've found in myself and in my clients, is that we had that belief to begin with. We went into this relationship with that belief, but it wasn't quite so big and in our face.
Yeah.
And then the longer we stayed in that relationship, particularly again, I'm really talking more about the serial cheaters, when we stayed long beyond when we could have learned our lesson and kind of moved on.
Yeah.
Um, I think that that belief continues to get reinforced more and more and more. So
Mm.
then we
Okay.
continue whatever the belief was of not being worthy, and I'll just use that one, but something around that area, whatever that belief was, it gets more and more and more reinforced. We believe it more and more. We get smaller and smaller and smaller in that relationship. It's not a relationship that empowers us. It's one that gets us smaller. So when we finally realize or recognize that that person is only going to be able to love us to this much,
Yeah.
when we choose that we want more than that, it really begins with, and I go back to self-love, which I didn't used to, but more recently, like that self-love is coming up, because I think if we love ourselves first, everything else follows, right? We
Absolutely.
naturally put boundaries into place. We don't have to think too much about it. It's just, am I loving myself? Am I honoring myself first? And it's not easy to self-love when
Mm-hmm.
we have those beliefs, and maybe we've
Mm-hmm.
been taught to take care of other people first.
Yeah.
Like I was taught to be kind and and sometimes that can mean I take care of them first, and we have to
Yep.
kind of pull it back and say, no, I'm going to take care of myself first. So I think
Mm-hmm.
the first thing really in taking back our power is to recognize it is in there, and then we just have to get clear on, what do we want? Like, what
Yeah.
do we want? And as we start focusing on what we want and moving in that direction, anything that's in the way is going to come up. As long as we're doing our, I call it like daily mindfulness work, where we're spending time each day in connection with ourselves, meditation, journaling, whatever it is that works for somebody. So we have that connection to our heart, to our soul. The stuff that needs to be healed, the beliefs and all that stuff, it'll come forth. But I think if we can start to focus on just getting clear on what we want,
Mm-hmm.
then we have a north star, right? Otherwise
Yeah.
we kind of sit there like, I don't know where to begin. Well, like, think about what you really want, and
Yeah.
then we can start moving down the path.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes
There's
sense.
this there's this term called brain fog. And it I was in a training for like narcissist or whatever, and she mentioned it, but she mentioned it in the context of like, once we leave an emotionally abusive partner and things like that, um she called it brain fog because she was like, your brain now has so much extra space
Mm.
to process things, because she was like, when you were in survival mode, you were always trying to figure out, is he lying, is he telling the truth, how can I trust him, do I know, and are trying to figure out how to catch him in a lie and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she was like, your mind was so filled up with all of that. And
Yeah.
so now that you have this sense of relief and you're actually working to move forward, she called it brain fog, because now this is where the doubts come, like all the beliefs that you mentioned, they're coming to the forefront again because of this. And I love what you're saying. Like, that's really what it is it's that brain fog of, now we're having to move through all of these and get clear on like what it is that we want and how we can recreate that.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that brain fog. And I love two things about what you said. Also, in that, when we're constantly trying to figure out, are they cheating? Are they not? Are we
Mm-hmm.
digging into their emails?
Mm-hmm.
Are we looking for it? It also puts us in fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
Like we start to live in fight or flight. So our
Mm-hmm.
nervous system is, all the adrenaline, everything is rushing through. So when we are leaving the situation, we have to, whether it be walking or breath work or yoga, it's like we have to recalibrate our nervous system. I love that term about brain fog. It makes so much sense. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's all of a sudden, we've been so focused on catching them, finding out, indecision, and then that space is there.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. I really love that, because I think it's so important to recognize that, so that when those things start to surface,
Yeah.
we also recognize that it was there. It was there the
Mm-hmm.
whole time, but it
Mm-hmm.
was being hidden by
Mm-hmm.
us being in action, in busyness, in
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
We had a purpose. We're going to find out, are they cheating? Are
Mm-hmm.
they not? Do I stay? Do I not? Like, we're so busy. I love that. I think it's so important to just know that that's going to be part of it. And then how are we going to fill that space? I think it's important too. I just want to say right here that I think it's important to recognize that, whether it be for myself or anybody I've worked with, I've always seen that the wound was there when we went into the relationship, right?
Yes.
That person didn't cause the wound.
Right.
The wound moved us to being into relationship with
Mm-hmm.
that person. And I think that that will
Mm-hmm.
help us to practice spiritual forgiveness, like,
Yeah.
because it can be so easy to, now you decide you leave. So you turn all that energy onto revenge and vengeance and
Yeah.
being mad, and essentially keeping yourself stuck, right? If now you're going to spend
Mm-hmm.
all that time analyzing what he did and how he did and what I should have done or shouldn't have done, it's like, we have to let it go. We have to go into that spiritual forgiveness, let it go, and then, like you said, move in to that brain fog and let the information come up and heal.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my dog's barking.
I know, I can hear it. I was like, okay. And then when I heard your dog barking, I was like, oh crap, we haven't even talked about Biscuit yet.
Usually my husband will take her and he's at work, and so then I can hear all the dogs in the neighborhood barking. So some other dog is walking by.
Oh, okay, okay. So that's what that means. Yes. Um, but okay, so it's so good because, so what I call it, when I'm working with clients is like, I call it the root sniper. So like, a lot of the times the surface level presenting problems are that insecurity, that inability to trust now, right? Anger, rage, vengeance,
Yeah.
jealousy, depression, sadness. I always tell people that's the surface level,
Yeah.
but we have to go deeper, because here's the thing, whether you want to reframe it as new year, new me, or I'm leaving him and I'm moving on to something better, you're going to just attract that same thing if you're just working on those surface level symptoms, right? And so, like you said, it's all that, whatever that belief or that core wound was, it was always present prior to him. But
Yeah.
sometimes women will think, okay, well, because I've left him, now I can rebuild and regrow,
Yeah.
and that's so far from the truth.
From what I've seen, until we heal the core belief, the core wounds, the core stuff, you'll bring in another person. It's going to be the
Mhm.
same dynamic,
Mhm.
just a different person standing in front of you. But
Mhm.
the same dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I love, one of the things that I love what you said when I was reading your bio was just you said your biggest path to spiritual growth was like the betrayal of your ex-husband. And I always think about that when I hear different women who have actually done the work post betrayal in a marriage, and just how that was one of the biggest awakenings for them. And, I hear you talk about really losing yourself in a relationship and getting smaller and smaller in your relationship. But I wanted to know, like, why do you think it is that a lot of women who go through betrayal and they come out of it healed, like why is that always the biggest spiritual transformation for us women?
You know, I think in life, so my belief is that we're here to grow, right? We're here to
Mhm.
become more and more and more robust versions of ourselves, which
Mhm.
means we are continually empowering ourselves more to be able to create the life that we want to live. So I feel like if we live long enough, we're all going to have not necessarily this, but we're going to have that one or two instances in life that bring us to our knees, right?
Mhm.
So for us, it happens to be betrayal. For
Yeah,
somebody else, it may not be. Their things might be something in in
that's
in,
true.
in something else. But
Mhm.
I feel like it's the moment that brings you to your knees. And what else brings you to your knees but having built a life, put your trust in, put all of yourself into something, and then have it like the rug ripped out from under you, but even worse because it's like someone someone did it. I
Mhm.
think it's a big lesson of growth, of allowance. What are we allowing? And
Mhm.
and I say that I I feel like part of taking our power back from betrayal. I know in the beginning when I start working with a lot of clients, a lot of the first things that they say is, "Well, it wasn't my fault. I
Yeah.
had nothing to
Yeah.
do with it. It wasn't my fault." And I understand, meaning I understand that you nor my actions didn't violate contracts or agreements or trust.
Yes.
But I always bring it down to, and I say this because I went through it, what did you allow? Like, what did
Mm.
I allow? What did you allow?
Mhm.
And I don't know anybody who has gone through the journey that we've gone through that doesn't do their timeline exercise or look back and see red flags and see time and time again when they allowed themselves to not listen to their intuition. They allowed
Yeah.
someone to tell them what they should be thinking. So it's allowance. We allowed ourselves to be treated a certain way. And I
Yeah.
think it's so transformational because when we finally do leave, it gets to that point, assuming that person doesn't heal themselves and become the great partner. When it gets to that point, it's like I think that we're faced with ourselves. We're faced with,
Mhm.
oh my God, like I treated myself, I allowed myself to be treated horribly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that was a big part. Like for me, it was horrible for how I was treated, but the big thing for me was like, oh my God, like I treated myself
Wow.
terribly. Like I
I
was so in
love
touch with that
that.
little girl in me, and I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't take care of her. Like I
Mhm.
didn't take care of her. I allowed her
Mhm.
to be treated this way. So I think
Mhm.
that recognition, when that light comes on and we're willing to see that,
Mhm.
I mean, how transformational is that? Because then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God. And then it becomes,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to
Mhm.
let myself be treated well. And I'm going to take care of that little girl within me.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of why it's just so transformational. It's rock bottom, right? It's
Mhm.
rock bottom.
No, seriously, it is rock bottom, but you know, there's a couple of things like I love saying, you have to move from the victim to the victor. And even one of my quotes that I have everywhere, like in my office, in my house, everywhere is like, um, I can be powerful or I can be powerless, but I can't be both. Like I can't, you know what I'm saying? I can't be both. And when we talk about taking our power back, when we come into situations and we say, well, I didn't do anything. Well, if you didn't do anything, then what you're saying is that I have no power to take control of this situation to change it. And so it is so important, because that's one of the things that I do, like in the first 2 weeks that I'm working with women, is I say, what role did you play in
Yes.
this?
And that, that is 100% it. And I know it's not always the most popular, but it is
Yeah.
the truth. It's just like what you said. If you think that you didn't do anything, had no responsibility or in it, then you're powerless. And now how can you step forward? Because it can always
Mm-hmm.
happen again. If you
Yep.
truly didn't do anything,
Yeah.
and then I say what we did usually is allowance, but if you truly had no responsibility in this, well, yeah, it's going to be pretty scary to move back out into the world
Mm-hmm.
because
Absolutely.
it can happen again. So
Exactly. It
it's
will happen
yeah.
again.
And I think that, I remember when everything first happened with me, it was very public. My now ex-husband, we had businesses in the town. I mean, it became very, very
Oh,
public because it was a big
wow.
deal. Like there were legal consequences for him, and it was very public. It was a very, very big deal.
When you say public, just like people knew, or like was it kind of like outed in some type of way, or what?
He had legal consequences. We
Woo!
owned businesses. So within a very short period of time, people knew.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
and I'll never forget that feeling too. It was like
And that's
feeling
a whole
shame.
nother layer of embarrassment. Like it's one thing to just be embarrassed privately and within the family, but then to have it public.
It was it was a whole other thing. I mean, talk about magnification. And I remember like
Mm-hmm.
feeling I was walking in to teach a yoga class and I didn't know if people knew yet. And I remember that feeling inside. I'm like, why am I feeling ashamed? Like I didn't do anything, but why am I feeling ashamed? And so there was all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff to unpack. But with it being like so public, a lot of people were reaching out to me and they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they were, calling him all kinds of names and this and that. And I could feel it inside of me. Like I could see how it could be very easy to say, oh yeah, because you're going to get people feeling bad for you and all of this stuff. But I could feel it. I'm like, that's not a road I can go down. Like it might be
Yeah.
tempting to want to say, to take that feeling from people, that love from people, that, calling him every name in the book and saying how you poor thing, and you're so this and he's so that. But it's like it's a trap, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we
Mm-hmm.
step into it, like you said, now we're in victimhood. Now we're
Yeah.
we're, we're getting a payoff from staying stuck in the story, right? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
a payoff.
Mm-hmm.
People are giving us accolades and all that, but I remember that feeling. I was like, oh my God, I could feel the negativity
Mm-hmm.
because even though they were hating what he did, which was not good, it was still hate, and it was still hate coming my
Yeah.
way. And I'm like, oh, this this isn't good.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Stepping into your power, taking responsibility, and not falling into these traps
Mm-hmm.
of 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 blaming the other person.
Absolutely. Yeah, because Dr. Henry Cloud, I read his book Trust, and he mentions that. He says anger is necessary, right? And he talks about it. He was like, you need anger sometimes to get you to the point where you actually can leave. You can be strong enough to leave. But
Yep.
then he says, once you have made the choice to leave and stay gone, you have to release that anger so you can truly start to heal, because you can't live in that anger.
Yep. 100%. I think that anger is really powerful to
Mhm.
move us forward. And
Mhm.
then the time comes where we
You got to
can't
cut it.
set up camp there.
Yeah, yeah. I think everything has its season, everything has its course, everything has its purpose.
Yep.
Because for me, I'm just a like you said, I've come to this space now where I don't judge, right? And I've realized that in the past I would judge a lot just because I was judging myself a lot and I was super unhappy with who I was as a person. But now that I have evolved and, found peace with who I am, it's easier for me to just accept people where they are and embrace them. Right. And that's one of the things that women are always like, well, people tell me I should forgive him, but I'm just not ready to. And I'm like, and that's okay, because they have to be able to forgive on their own terms. And that's something that I tell them. If you still want to be angry right now, that's totally fine. If you still have not found it in your heart to fully forgive him, because if you just fake it and say, okay, I forgive him, and then you're still going through these motions, it's because you're not being truthful to yourself. Right.
Yeah.
And I even think that's another thing of like, we don't trust ourselves. So when you talk about overlooking all of these red flags and not trusting your own tuition, and so as we're starting to come into leaving that partner, or now we are alone and we're trying to rebuild trust, or even if you want to stay with that man and rebuild trust, it's hard to rebuild trust with someone when you don't even trust yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that that's also really important what you said too. And there must be a neighboring dog. So my
Oh.
dogs don't usually continue on this long. I'm like, what are they doing? Now Chapin's up here like, let me out. I think it's so important too, because if you're not ready to leave, I always say, like, you don't want to leave before you're ready to leave, right? And
I
that's
agree.
really important. And maybe it's because you don't know how you're going to financially provide for yourself or anything else. You're just not ready.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, when you're ready, you'll go. But what I think is important is to keep doing that inner work of
Yeah.
worth and deserving, and just being willing to see what's actually there. And if it is something like a financial situation, well, start, stay in your
Mhm.
marriage, but
Mhm.
start, go get, start looking for ways that you can make money, start a job, start doing something, if that's
Mhm.
your reason, so that you can step out into it. If your heart's just not ready, I mean, just keep your eye, like, keep doing your inner work and that
Yeah.
self-love, and stepping into your power, and just be willing to see what's there. And then it's almost like, like the 99 strands. It's like you might like be cutting like strand by strand, and then all of a sudden one day that's just the strand, and there is no more debate. It's like it
Mhm.
just is what it is. The window has closed. I remember
Mhm.
saying that to my ex-husband a lot. I would catch him and I would say, he would do his pleading and do all of that, and we would maybe go to counseling or do whatever we were doing. And I remember saying to him, essentially, that I'm going to take you back this time, but one day I'm not going to take, if you keep going like this, one day I'm not going to take you back.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it had to get very big. I wish it didn't have to get that big, but it did.
Mhm.
But I really feel that way, especially with women. I feel that we will take and take and take. We'll give every
Yeah.
opportunity, every chance. But when we know
Yeah.
it's it. It's done. The window is closed. They can say and do.
Mhm.
They could even really change. It's too
Yeah.
late. It's
It's
like
too
it's too
late.
late. So I always say to people, like, trust your journey, continue to honor yourself, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you're cheating, and then just do your work and do your journaling, and and do what you need to do, and then it will just happen. Like, the day will
Yeah.
come where it won't be a big like this. It will just be,
Mhm.
maybe you'll have to take a little bit of a leap. Maybe it'll just be a step, but the day is going to come, as
Yeah.
long as you keep doing your inner work, where it's just no longer going to be a match. Even vibrationally, it's not going to
Yeah.
be a match.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you'll look up, and because you've been doing the work, you'll grow apart.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying. Like, it won't be a match. And I love the messaging that you're sharing today of just being gentle with yourself. I'm sure you get this experience a lot, where a lot of my clients, because we're in this social media age, they're constantly watching, personally developing themselves. So they're listening to podcast after podcast, reading book after book, and watching reel after reel about taking your power back or overcoming infidelity. And so then when they come to me, they're beating themselves up because they're like, well, it's been 6 months and I'm supposed to be here. And I'm like, look, healing, there's no set time frames to healing, and in fact it's actually cyclical. Like you might be at stage, you might revert back one step or two. But I think that I love what you're saying is like it's on your time. You take it step by step, so don't feel like, okay, well it's been 6 months out or a year out, I should be further along, I shouldn't be hurting this much. This is your journey, and you
Absolutely.
have to embrace and accept that.
Yeah, and I love what you just said right there, right? Beating ourselves up,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's like it actually hurts my heart when I think about that. We have such a tendency to do it. I should do this.
Yeah.
I've listened to this. I've listened to that. And of course, anybody who's in the middle of something right now who's listening to us, we're far along, right? Like
Yeah,
we went
exactly.
through however many years we went through however long healing, like we're on the other side now,
Mhm.
reaching back and supporting others and going through it. But the biggest thing is to be gentle with yourself. And that
Yeah.
gentleness is self-love. And that is
Mhm.
going to be building you up and building up your power to make it very easy
Mhm.
to one day just it's just not going to work for you anymore
Yeah.
with that person, unless again that person does his work or her work and
Right.
and and,
Mhm.
and shifts around. And
Yeah.
there's always that possibility, but of course we only care about, not that we care about, but our journey is our journey, so we let
Yeah.
them have their journey.
They do
We can
theirs,
only
we
take
do
care of
ours.
ourselves, we can only control ourselves, so that's where we put the focus. But that being gentle is so important.
It's so key. And so I love what you're saying when we talk about taking our power back. It's being gentle with ourselves, taking it one step at a time, getting clear on exactly what it is and what we need to move through. Um,
And clear on what
and
we want.
yeah, and so I feel like that has really helped people. But one thing I do want to ask you before we leave is for those women who are like in the thick of it, because you and I we talked about, we went back and looked at things, and we looked at how, oh, we ignored this red flag and this red flag. Like some of the things that I did, I ignored. Just how, like you said, you weren't working, and my thing was hanging out with my friends. Like I started to slowly get ostracized from my friends because there were things that he didn't want me to do. There were things he didn't want me to wear, right?
Sure.
Or and even years ago, my friends were telling me you should start a blog years ago, and I wanted to start one, and he was like, no. And so talk about like what are some of those red flags that women should be aware of that they don't even maybe consider are red flags at that time.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because
Mhm.
the red flags in retrospect are easy to see.
Mhm.
Like what you just talked about and what I talked about, we weren't allowed, or we were
Ooh.
discouraged to do
Yeah.
things that we
Yeah.
wanted to do. You wanted
Mhm.
to hang out with your friends. You wanted to wear something that you felt really good in. I wanted to go
Mhm.
back, into work and feel power. It's like I think those red flags are number one, something that you really want to do. And if you can see it a little bit deeper, those things would have empowered us, right? So
Mhm.
the serial cheater who has no intention of changing doesn't want us to be empowered. They want us to
Yeah.
be like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anytime you want to do something from your heart and you're being told no or discouraged from doing it, I'd say that's a red flag. I'm in a great
Mhm.
relationship now,
Mhm.
and there is not one thing that he's not going to encourage me to do. I mean, it's
Yes.
constant encouragement. It's, yeah, go, do, and this.
And
It's
I
a
bet it feels completely different, doesn't it? It's
complete
like, oh my gosh.
completely different. So I think that would be probably the biggest red flag, is not wanting you to be with your friends, not wanting you to go do anything that's going to bring you joy or empowerment or fulfillment. Just wants
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, because you're in a relationship now and it's flourishing, and like you said, it's completely opposite from your first marriage. But sometimes people can, because that's so scary and that's scary territory. Like, were you at first a bit apprehensive, or like how did you go into that? Because I know a lot of women who can actually block themselves from that opportunity. And I've been there where like I've been like, oh, this is too good to be true. This can't be. So how do you even navigate that? Like re-entering back into a healthy relationship?
Well, it's interesting because I knew I wanted to be in a relationship eventually. Like I still had this vision of what a healthy marriage was, and I knew that I wanted it. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want it right away. I wanted to build up my career first.
Okay.
And then that didn't happen. I mean, I it was probably a couple of years after everything happened, I met
Mm-hmm.
him and I literally heard a voice in my head that said, "Oh, it's you." And we connected so strongly. And that's not to say, because
Yeah.
I believe that healthy relationships, they can be challenging, right? Like we
Absolutely.
again,
Yeah.
we're here to grow, and some of our biggest growth moments and opportunities are within our relationship. So I'm not saying that this is like, the Prince Charming carrying away, which I think is part of
Mm-hmm.
why we get into trouble when we believe that's
Yeah.
true. So I think for me, my whole focus was healing myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I was healing myself, I was empowering myself. And then when he stepped in, I never even had, there was never even in my heart something that said he's going to betray me or do this. Like I
Yeah.
knew who he was. And I think part
Mm-hmm.
of it was in that healing work, in being willing to look at the relationship with my ex-husband. As you said before, if you're not going to take any responsibility or have no sit power, that then you can think that you're going to be able to bring it in. But I had gone through my past relationship with such a fine-tooth comb to take
Mm-hmm.
every ounce of responsibility that I could, to
Yeah.
understand why I was in it to begin with, to understand why I stayed in it. And it was really just willing to see the truth, right? Like willing to see the things that are kind of in our shadow, that, not the best parts of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
willing to do a little work to understand what I really believed about myself, which I did this
Mm-hmm.
exercise. And I mean, the stuff that was coming out on that paper about what I truly felt about myself was
Yeah.
horrible. I mean, how I
Yeah.
felt horrible. So when I did so much of that healing work, there was no way that anybody else could possibly come in that door. And I think I also had told myself that I was going to see the truth of what was there. So I knew going in, and I had that agreement with myself. I
Mm-hmm.
will listen to my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I will stand in my power, and I will see everything that is there. I'm not going to see what I want to see. I'm going to see the truth of what's there. And
Yeah.
I do a daily practice, right? It's my spiritual practice or mindfulness practice. So I spend 10, 20, 30 minutes every day doing meditation, doing journaling, doing different things. So I feel like I have that connection to myself. Like my intuition is so clear. That voice in my head is so clear
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like I'm in my power, right?
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like that's how I was able to. It took a couple of years of that intense work,
Mm-hmm.
but I trust myself.
Mm-hmm.
I trust myself. And I trust that
Mm-hmm.
if anything ever shifted, I would step out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Stacy, would you say it's safe to say that as we talk about reclaiming joy and taking your power back, that the most important piece to this, or the first step, I would say, is to, like you said, create some type of mindful practice. Because the thing is, when we're holding on to all of this shame and all of this hurt and everything, it's deferring us from being able to get clear on a path to where we can rebuild that trust in within our own selves. And so you have to find out and figure out and create a way for yourself that is best for you to get all of that is inside of you out, so that you can then be able to move through your new evolution.
100%. Because if, like you said, if it's not coming out, it's in, and you're going to
Mm-hmm.
attract the same thing again,
Yeah.
again, and again, and again. It's just going to,
Yeah.
the cycle's going to continue.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Stacy, I just want to say thank you so much. This has been an amazing episode. And I'm actually going to let you close it out. What I just, like I said, I've never done any of this stuff on an episode. So it's weird.
I love it.
But I will say this. Speak to the woman who is in the thick of it, because like you said, you and I, are completely on the other side of it. But, if you could give her one word of encouragement or inspiration, what would you say to that woman right now who is in the thick of things?
So the woman who is in the thick of it right now. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
take what you said, be gentle with yourself. That has to be first and foremost. Get your daily practice. Give yourself 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a little bit longer. Begin with journal writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Begin with a journal writing practice. Begin with a simple meditation. Begin with something, some quiet space so that you are connected to your heart, and you
Yeah.
can let your heart lead, and being gentle. But it's that daily practice that gives the space.
Yeah. Yeah. Letting your heart lead. And that is how we're going to close out this episode. Be gentle with yourself, you guys, and let your heart lead. If you feel like you're not ready to leave yet, which is what we talked about, leave on your own time. Your life, you create your life on your own terms. All the advice, even our personal stories that we share with you, is just to give you, something to go by or go off of. But it's not saying that that's law. You're the master and creators of your own lives. So be gentle with yourselves. Um, Stacy, before we leave, let the people know what you have coming up, or if they would love to work with you, where they can find you, and definitely tell them about your meditations, where they can subscribe and get connected with your daily meditations.
Yeah. So stacypage.com. If you go onto that website, you'll see there's a weekly blog that I do. There's weekly meditations that I do that are about 5, 6, 7 minutes. Easy places to start for daily practice. And you can sign up for my newsletter. It goes out once a week on Sundays, and there's always a message in there. There's an affirmation, some other tools for healing, and that meditation. So it's a free resources and a great place to start.
Yes. Well, you guys, you heard it. Go follow Stacy. Work with her if you can. And you definitely got to follow her, because we didn't even talk about her fish biscuit at all in this episode. And I sincerely apologize, Biscuit. I'm so sorry.
My goldfish that just brings joy everywhere. You all heard my dogs.
We did look,
There's a
we did
blog
hear
about
the
them
dogs.
too.
We did hear the dogs, but we did not get to talk about Biscuit. And Biscuit was the one I said I was talking about today. But Biscuit, just know we did talk about reclaiming joy. And so you guys can catch that blog as well, on Stacy's page. So again, Stacy, thank you so much. This message has been amazing. And I know that it is going to resonate in the hearts and spirits of those who need to hear it. And so, you guys, I hope that you find value in this conversation for sure. So like, comment, share, subscribe. And again, my name is Briaina Latrice, removing the shame of your decision to leave or stay after infidelity, because both decisions will be hard. And I'm here to help you navigate your heart. And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.